Day 850 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So, starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 534,000 military personnel losses, which includes an additional 1,270 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, 10 tanks, 15 APVs, and a whopping 61 artillery. Then we'll head across to the map and start out in Russia, which, by the way, is a location I almost never went to on the map at the start of this video series. And it was hard to imagine back then that Russia would be dealing with weekly, if not daily, threats inside their own borders. Take, for instance, overnight, an explosion rocked the city of Rostov, with local sources reporting a transformer explosion causing a fire. Then also in Rostov, Russian media reported that a supply warehouse of the Russian Internal Ministry was on fire as well. Now, the causes of both events are still not known, however it does appear quite suspicious. Then headed up the map to Belgorod as Ukrainian forces allegedly struck a Pantsir S-1 anti-aircraft missile system, which once again raises questions about the effectiveness of Moscow's protective measures. While Russian officials claim to have intercepted several aerial targets, the reported destruction of the Pantsir system has left many Russians uneasy, with some telegrams in the region saying, quote, "This is our air defense, what now?" Another Pantsir caught with its pants down. These expensive, multi-million-dollar, all-in-one air defense systems have not been making a good name for themselves in this war. But it's not just the loss of air defense systems that Russia is worrying about, because in another layer of the unfolding conflict, Russian Telegram channel Fighter Bomber reports that Ukrainian forces are employing a strategic tactic during Russian air operations. According to these claims, Ukraine is launching rockets and missiles precisely when Russian attack aviation is active, aiming to increase the likelihood of friendly fire incidents from the Russian side. This tactic, if accurate, represents a calculated attempt to exploit moments of vulnerability within Russian aviation, complicating defense efforts and increasing operational risks. Then on the map and even further up we go, as the Ukrainian Partisan group Atesh claimed to have successfully infiltrated the Baltimore airfield in Voronezh. The strategic airbase, located approximately 220 kilometers northeast of the Ukrainian border, houses Russia's Aviation Guard Regiment. Atesh operatives scouted the facility, sharing images and videos of various aircraft, including helicopters and even Su-34 jets. The group ominously hinted at potential sabotage operations, stating, quote, "In some of them, Russians now have surprises waiting for them." So this bold claim suggests that Atesh may have tampered with or planted devices on some of the aircraft, although it seems more like a psyop, if I do say so myself, as the Atesh partisans may be keeping themselves busy elsewhere. Then headed across to Ukraine on the map, and we'll start out in the northeast sector, as the Ukrainian military reports that some Russian forces are withdrawing from the Vovchansk area in Kharkiv due to a loss of combat capability. Nazar Voloshin, spokesperson for Ukraine's Khortytsia group of forces, announced that these withdrawals are occurring near the villages of Liptsy and Taika. So Liptsy is on the west and Taika all the way over on the east. Oh, and since I'm in the area, I'll also mention that there was a successful Ukrainian airstrike on the command point of a motorized rifle regiment of the Russian army, which happened just over the border at Nekotyevka, which is remarkably close to Ukraine. Obviously too close. And, somewhat unsurprisingly, right next to the main highway as well. Because, long story short, Russia loves their highways, but hates rivers. Then headed farther down on the map, as Russian forces are intensifying offensive operations in the Donetsk Oblast. But take for example Chasiv Yar, where the front line east of the city is largely stable, but instead it's the minor gains in the eastern micro-district where the Russian forces are keeping up their intensity. Similar story, but nearby Kalinivka also remains under Ukrainian control after recent counterattacks. Then headed further down on the map, as Russian forces continue their attempts to advance on the Avdiivka axis, and right now, particularly to the Karlivka settlement. Now, some sources stated that Russian forces were fighting inside the settlement, but as at the current moment, that is in fact categorically false, with more likely than anything fighting on the extreme eastern outskirts of the settlement instead. Then taking a look around on the map, because somewhere in the east we saw 2 BMP-1s and a Russian tank destroyed in or near to Asharatana. Then as for the infamous Road of Destruction for the Russian occupiers near Novomikhailivka in the Donetsk region, where we see more Russian heavy armor destruction, due to being a location that is perfectly targeted by AFU soldiers, but Putin's troops stubbornly continue to try to advance in senseless assaults with an unhappy ending every time. Then also, we saw this Russian BMP that looks like it's wrapped in duct tape, which had firstly hit a mine, then after that event, an FPV came in and finished the job. And if you look closely, you can see the FPV drone incoming with its corresponding shadow too. Then also, we saw some videos and photos from the Russian side, as here we see a destroyed Russian T-80 BV tank and a 1960s vintage Akatsiya 152mm self-propelled howitzer. Although the wreckage or wreckages are not really discernible. Then also, we saw a destroyed Russian Giant Sint S 152mm SPG, but judging by the damage, this loss was as a result of the detonation of a shell inside the barrel. Probably from some fresh North Korean shells. Or not so fresh. And imagine that, hey, the very munitions required by these systems is the very same thing destroying them. Oh, the irony. Then lastly, we saw the targeting of a Russian T-90M main battle tank on the Bakhmut front. This one happened to be in an upwards inclined artillery mode when it was hit by a quadcopter. Which means, in this instance, Russia's got their best tank doing imprecise and lower yield artillery fire. Then on the map, complaints from the northern front lines are becoming increasingly vocal, with Russian Z bloggers expressing growing concerns about the overwhelming presence of Ukrainian drones. One blogger highlighted a significant disparity, noting that the ratio of drones on the front line is approximately 1:6, not in Russia's favor, with the gap reportedly widening. The blogger also pointed out that in Ukraine, small NGOs and private workshops are well coordinated and funded, resulting in a substantial increase in both the quantity and quality of their drone operations. In contrast, many promising Russian projects have stalled due to bureaucratic inefficiencies or insufficient funding. And so one stark illustration of this issue was provided by the blogger, who recounted how 245 Ukrainian FPV drone attacks had occurred on a single position in his Vovchansk region from dawn to dusk, as they faced relentless drone assaults on their positions. It's quite the disparity. Then headed down the map, as very recently, smoke has been rising from Sevastopol after several explosions were reported. The Russian-installed governor claims all aerial threats were shot down, but there was also some further air defense activity reported in the adjacent town of Balaklava. Then also, as for this region, in a significant tactical shift, Russia has begun launching Kalibr cruise missiles from the Sea of Azov, moving away from its traditional Black Sea deployment. This change, confirmed by Naval Forces spokesperson Dmitry Pletenchuk, signals a growing vulnerability in Russia's naval operations. And so the decision to use the Azov Sea as a launch platform underlines the effectiveness of Ukraine's maritime strategies. And with approximately 30% of Russia's Black Sea fleet reportedly destroyed by December time last year, Moscow is clearly seeking safer waters for its naval assets from the likes of both aerial and naval drones. So not exactly a projection of power in the Black Sea. Then headed across to some news for today. So a Ukrainian manufacturer of UAVs named Air 3F showed a drone with AI guidance and object tracking in action. This video shows a test example of the AI directing itself to a vehicle target, but the testing also had it programmatically baked in so as to not to engage at the last moment. And so this AI controlled functionality is useful in many ways, but particularly useful where any Russian electronic warfare systems sever the wireless connection between the drone and the operator, so as to still make it effective in that scenario. Then in some more hardware news, in a surprising twist of geopolitical maneuvering, Serbia has emerged as a significant supplier of ammunition to Ukraine's defensive efforts. So despite its historical ties to Russia, Belgrade has managed to export an estimated 800 million euros worth of ammunition that has found its way to Ukrainian forces via third parties. Now, all in all, it's expected that this volume of ammunition has been sent over the last year or two after being purchased by other nations to send to Ukraine. And while Serbia maintains a public stance of neutrality and friendship with both Kyiv and Moscow, Serbia has quietly capitalized on the conflict, reviving its defense industry and boosting its economy. Then to a quick bit of Russian hardware news update. So here we go. We became aware of the case of a fresh batch of Russian T-55 main battle tanks spotted on their way to the 3-day special military operation. So that's some genuinely degrading stuff for the world's second army. Now, since these tanks are of such vintage, each tank was likely restored by cannibalizing multiple other T-55 tanks to make a complete tank. I shudder to think just how many tanks were required to complete a single operational tank. But from lack of mothballing and more than half a century of poor storage conditions, I really sincerely doubt that these ones do much more than run. And just to give you an idea of the contrast between the armor of a T-55 tank and that of, say, a Leopard 2 tank, the T-55 has about 100mm of steel armor on the front hull, probably oxidized too, whereas the Leopard has around 700mm, so we're talking about a night and day difference between the two, and truly on every single metric. Then headed across to a quick funny to round it all off for today, guys. So the Ukrainian army released a video showing the poor condition of Russian turtle tanks, an unboxing video review, if you will, for which they gave a long list of problems that it faced. For instance, they state this turtle tank is an old T-62 tank covered with scrap metal. Also, the turret cannot move, obviously. But also, this one has a non-operational cannon. The thing won't fire. They also state that there's poor visibility, obviously, and that the engines are inefficient and noisy. And very smoky too, devoid of any stealth characteristics, and that they can be easily immobilized by the Ukrainian FPV drones as well. I mean, they really got into just how bad this tank is. And so the video's revelations ultimately emphasizes the deteriorating state of the Russian army and logistics, showcasing their desperation and declining equipment quality as the war progresses. Substandard equipment. I really hope one of these makes it to a museum someday. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. I hope you've enjoyed, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!